Will, who do you go to first?
So let's go to Paul calling in Virginia on line 1. Hey, Paul, you're on Seculo.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, I am an ACLJ champion. I just want to mention that, and thank you for taking my call. My question is, I understand the governor of New York can pardon former President Trump, and in consideration of the damage that this conviction does to the presidency, to the office of the president, to the country, what is more important? Is it more important to alleviate that damage or not pardon Trump and just let that conviction stand?
Let me tell you something. The Democrat governor of New York is not going to pardon Donald Trump. I mean, it's just. I mean, Will, not only she's attacked people who even show up at rallies for Donald Trump. So the fact is, she might try to temper some of her language, like when these cases have come out. But honestly, I mean, she's gone after President Trump and his supporters.
That's right. And Logan's favorite thing on this broadcast was the clowns, because we've been having many of you putting the clown emojis in the chat since this, because of the governor of New York calling the people that would show up to a rally the clowns. And do we have that bite? Let's go ahead and play it so people can hear who, Paul, unfortunately, I don't think that this governor who would say this is the one that's going to pardon him. Let's play it.
Well, I'll tell you, it won't make a difference at all, Jake, and that is for Donald Trump to be the ringleader of and invite all his clowns to a place like the Bronx.
But yeah, I don't think that, unfortunately, I don't think the governor of New York is going to see what could be better for the country in this situation and pardon him.
But a different kind of governor in a different place, and that's why they're strategically going to file, of course could. So in most states, the governor would have that power on these state charges. Now, what weirdly here would be interesting here if it did happen was, but if it was what made it a felony actually federal, which even though the DA is not supposed to be able to use federal law, in fact, the Supreme Court's been very clear about that. The legal system's very clear on that about local DAs. So could the governor then actually issue the pardon because it was a federal issue? Fortunately, we don't have to worry about that in New York because there's no pardon going. Now, I did want to address True because I think it's important to do that right now. I've got about a minute before we go to our next segment of the broadcast. Is a lot of people say, can you go right to the U.S. Supreme Court? And, our answer, our analysis is, while you can sometimes try and do that and take these emergency appeals, that likely if you've listened closely to leaders like Speaker Johnson and others who say the Supreme Court may ultimately have to get involved, they say that that's a long process. You first have got to go through and exhaust your ability to appeal in New York. And then after you've done that and gone through the entire New York system, and there's 2 more stages to that for President Trump, you then could make that appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, which may be the first court that will hear this potentially that's honest and that would hear it openly and it could see kind of down the road past Donald Trump a little bit better than these lower courts have been able to do. Will, let's go to the phones.
That's right. We are going to go in the order of which you've been holding. So we're going to start with Bill in Wyoming on line 2. Bill, you're on Seculo.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm going to try and be as polite as possible because I'm really upset about the fact of what's been going on, what I've learned about the classified documents with Jack Smith, and comparing that to what's been going on with a, quote, air quote, hush money against President Trump, that the DAs and judge are very vocal as well as public about, persecuting, prosecuting, however you want to call it,
and a little bit of
this trial against former President Trump. It really upsets me.
Yeah. Well, I think this is what we have to realize. You've got Jack Smith on the federal side. His case in D.C. right now, Will, that's on hold because the U.S. Supreme Court is going to decide what level of immunity does the president have when it comes to, his official acts. And I think where that case is going is likely back to lower courts to determine how do you strictly define official acts for the purposes of these post-presidential prosecutions, if you will. So what isn't privilege? What wasn't covered by presidential immunity? For instance, I don't think any president should be charged with a military decision that they made that went wrong. If they were, they're acting in the best faith. They take their advisor's advice. Some may say this, other advisors say this. They choose one of the actions to take, and things don't always go perfectly. I don't think they should get criminally charged. I don't think a liberal who told you the whole time they want to raise your taxes should be charged criminally because they end up signing a piece of legislation that raises our taxes. But what I am concerned about, Will, is it becomes the norm in our country. We're seeing that from some Republicans. That's why I would like people to take a step back and say, let's not make this the norm in the United States of America.
Well, and I think one good example is a case that we worked on here at the ACLJ, which was the Colorado ballot access case. And so we knew that it would be a battle, and that if we played it right and by the law in the court system, that we would be successful at the end of the day. And there are many that wanted to then utilize the same issues that were brought up in the lower courts in the state system of Colorado and saying, okay, well, now let's flip that and let's use it on Joe Biden. But we knew that we wanted to preserve the democratic republic that we have. We wanted the rule of law to succeed. And so that's why groups like the ACLJ, we represented the Republican Party of Colorado that was a party to that case. And we took it all the way from district court at the state level through the Supreme Court of Colorado to the United States Supreme Court on expedited basis. And we're successful. We had a victory in that, where we were saying, look, there are rules in America. There are regulations, and the state, a Secretary of State of Colorado can't just do this willy-nilly. Now, that's where a lot of people point to what's going on in New York, that it was such a novel legal idea that Alvin Bragg conjured up to be able to go after the former president, that even at the appeals level within New York, it may not even have to go to the state Supreme Court before there's an overturning of the conviction. Now, I'm sure that there are other issues that can come out of that, but there's a good chance even at the next level we could start to see justice, just because even Ellie Honig on CNN or on MSNBC, you're seeing commentators say, this doesn't, now they may have presented a better case to a jury to get what they wanted, but we're not so certain that they had the best grasp of the law when they got
it in front of a judge.
Exactly.
And see, that's what happens at the next level of these appeals, which is about a month away, a little bit less than a month away now. July 13th, I think, because July 11th is the sitting, and I think they have a July 13th to file their notice of appeal. Then the appellate division of New York, that's the second level in New York, will tell them when their briefs are due. And that could be 30 days, 60 days. I mean, you could see this could go, again, past the election before this has been figured out. It might not. I mean, they might actually speed it up some. We'll take more calls, though, because we got a lot of calls related to how this works through the judicial system.
Let's go to Phil in New York on line 1 real quick, and this is about the actual convention itself.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Don't get me wrong when I ask this. I'm a fervent supporter of Donald Trump. However, the question now becomes relevant. If he can't run in November, will Nikki Haley automatically become the Republican candidate?
No, the person who came in second place when it comes to delegates doesn't automatically become the candidate. What happened, or what would happen, Will, is you'd have a very lively Republican convention which used to be how they were in the past, where you'd have a few days and these people would determine, delegates would determine then who they ultimately want to nominate. Again, that's a what-if scenario, because Donald Trump could run here even if he's fully convicted on appeal.
That's right. And even according to a lot of the laws and state laws, it doesn't even look like he would necessarily lose his right to vote because of the New York laws. And even though Florida, they normally defer to the other state you're convicted in. Right. So it doesn't look like that's a likely scenario, but I do see a lot of people in the op-ed class that are trying to pontificate that. Let's go ahead and go to Jeff in California on line 4. Jeff, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I haven't heard any legal analyst mention this. Where did the New York City Trump prosecution introduce evidence into the record that here's the federal election law that Trump violated, and here's how he violated?
Yeah, no, all they generally said was he's either violated state election law, federal election law, and what that would be is that you didn't report the funds the correct way. That's all I can figure out from them, is that, you've got to, when you run your campaign, you've got to file correctly with the Federal Election Commission. So if you put something down as a legal expense and it was a campaign expense, and it was a campaign expense that may be more than you're allowed to give or to write that way, then you might get some FEC issues with fines. What we haven't seen before is this isn't FEC issues with fines. This is talking about criminal prosecutions and putting someone behind bars.
Yeah, let's try to get one more call in. Lynn, quickly. We've only got about a minute left. You're on the air.
I'm wondering if there isn't something the GOP or Congress can do to the DOJ to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court to stop all of these usurping, manipulating lawsuits that are going on during a voting year, because it seems to me that it's completely taking due process off its course, rules of procedure off its course. It's beyond frivolous, and it's crippling this nation.
Remember, though, they got a guilty verdict. I agree with everything you're saying, but they went to 12 jurors. They chose those 12 jurors with the Trump attorneys, and they got a guilty verdict. When I say they, I mean the left. So what we have to do is fight legally. Now, can we establish ultimately a precedent that this is not a viable option? Yes. But I think that's going to be, probably multiple lines of different court cases.
That's right.
Probably from the state into the federal courts as well.
That's right. And it's not going to be quick. No. It probably will not happen this year in the election year. So
this is probably the only case we're going to see a resolution to. At all. Even that, we're not seeing the resolution because now it's going to be on appeal, and that will be on appeal long after people vote in November.